Will, before we talk about criminals being allowed to work from home on community sentences, let me ask you about the Syrian situation, because obviously the ex-boss of MI6 this morning saying in the papers that, you know, we've got to be very careful about a threat to our security coming from these ISIS and Islamic State people who might be freed in Syria and who might want to make it over here.
Mike, we've got a serious problem with Syria, real serious problem with Syria. Well, there were 5 factions which were involved in their Operation Freedom, if you like, to overthrow the Bashar al-Assad regime. And the main group, HTS, as they are abbreviated to, which is the largest of the group, they were originally founded by Islamic State. Islamic State, they then separated from, this is back in 2012 approximately, they then aligned themselves to Al-Qaeda, and then they became their own little faction. Now, these guys have got very much aligned agendas to both of those terrorist groups. HTS is also a prescribed and known terrorist group to the UK, to the United States, many other international countries. So now we have somewhere, and this is always the dichotomy, Mike. A lot of people talk about dictators being a negative thing. Sometimes, in some circumstances, and these are rare circumstances, having a dictator is the only way to actually keep a pretty volatile country under control. Now, that's not to say that there are those that were opposed to the Assad regime. I certainly know or knew some members of the Free Syrian Army who had very, very good justification to try and re-establish democracy in the country. But we've now got a country, as you rightly say, Mike, which is now fractured. And I think we're going to see a mimic of what we've seen and see right now in Libya, where you have different groups, different militia controlling different parts of the country. We're not going to see a unified country. And by proxy of that, you have a situation which then becomes a fertile breeding ground for terrorist training camps and for individuals to be able to undertake their own pre-planned operations or rehearsals before bringing those potentially over to the United Kingdom, Europe and the United States.
Yeah, because Russia's still a player there. We don't know what they're doing with their military bases. I'm told that the Russian personnel are not currently there, but, you know, they might want to go back at some point. We've got the Americans occupying a part of it. You've obviously got people coming in from Lebanon as well. Some Syrians who want to go back, some more Syrians who want to leave. You know, it's a whole hotbed of craziness, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and you throw into that mix, you've got President Erdogan of Turkey, who has, although said, yes, I'm not actively involved or participant with HTS and other groups, obviously overthrowing the regime, he has been active behind the scenes. Turkey is a country that we've really got to watch out for, particularly under President Erdogan's control and management right now. And certainly he is one to watch, certainly for the year ahead. I've been saying this to you, Mike. We've said this not only on the show, we've said this when we've had a drink together. 2025 is shaping up to look kind of challenging in terms of international terrorism, and particularly when we bear in mind Afghanistan has become a huge terrorist training camp facilitated by the Taliban for ISIS-K, Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, and particularly Al-Qaeda 2.0, which is now being led by Osama bin Laden's son.
Incredible. Let's move on to more domestic matters, as if we didn't have enough problems with terrorists coming into the country. Criminals now who have been sentenced to some fairly hefty, you know, community sentences for theft, for assault, for shoplifting, property damage, you know, quite serious crimes, are apparently being allowed to have their community sentences basically served while working from home.
Well, isn't that nice, Mike?
Lovely.
Isn't it nice to be able to commit a crime and be able to have the pleasure of serving your time, your sentence from home? The one thing that worries me about this, Mike, and I know this from actively having been asked and requested to assist certain people on this, is the tagging. All of these individuals will have tags. They will be subject to curfews. They will be subject to not being able to move from the perimeters and the boundaries of their home. Does that mean that they can't communicate? Now, let's not be naive. In prisons, there are contraband phones, which criminals, and particularly target criminals, will be using to run and coordinate their operations. But we're talking about low-level individuals. They could be involved in narcotics or other contraband dealing, theft, burglary, all sorts of things, as you rightly say. Running from home, they're almost given a freedom of being able to communicate, run their businesses, contact and communicate with their colleagues. It's disastrous, Mike. But this really all comes from the whole issue of overcrowding in jails and there not being enough space, obviously, to facilitate and house all of them. We've seen this with the release of prisoners quite recently.
But we also hear as well from the probation service that they are really struggling to keep an eye on the people that they've already got to keep an eye on. So the more people that they are supposedly keeping an eye on, the less likely they are to be able to do so, right?
Well, yes, you've got a problem, you're absolutely right, with the resource to be able to go around, the probation officers to be able to go around and visit these individuals and get them to, well, generally, where someone is released on licence, they will go and see the probation officer. You imagine now the size of the work and the chore that is attached to these probation officers, that the individuals are not reporting into them or reporting into the police station necessarily. They are going to have to go around to their homes. They're going to have to check on them. And if you were a criminal, Mike, and you were running an operation, drug dealing, county lines, whatever it might be, you know, you're going to hide all your contraband when the probation officer comes over. And what right does the probation officer have, or the skill for that matter, to be able to search the property or even interrogate to find out whether this individual is still running their criminal operation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole shambolic situation, isn't it, really? Not very good at all. Will, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Will